What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm bringing you my QB rankings as we head into the 2021-2022 NFL season. Been pondering, I've mentioned this in a few different videos, but today is the day we're finally going to start giving you my position rankings, starting with, of course, the most important position in the NFL, the quarterback position. So, if you're excited for this video, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content like this, and want to help us get closer to 100 subs on the channel, please consider hitting that big red subscribe button. And comment away. Tell me who I have too high, who do I have too low, and give me some of your rankings. Maybe who your favorite quarterback is and where you think they rank among the top 32. I am only going to do 32, though at the very end of this video, I will make note of the 3 rookie quarterbacks I don't have as projected starters, at least as of right now, and where I would put those 3 players. I am using our lads for 31 of the 32 projected starters. The one changes with Denver. I made a little bit of a tweak compared to what our lads has, but most of these quarterbacks and who I have as the registered starter is because of our lads and who they have in that starting QB spot. And one last disclaimer, I was talking about this ranking with some of my friends and people I work with, and I had to make this kind of clear, and maybe it hopefully cleared the air with them, and hopefully it will with you, but I am basing this off of just one season alone, not talking about 5 years down the line, just this upcoming season, and in a vacuum setting where I get this QB and I get the absolute perfect offense for him. So, like, obviously a system for someone like Jimmy Garoppolo is a little different than that of Kyler Murray. So take that into account. I'm just, taking them in their, maybe you would say it's their current system, but an ideal system for them. And that's how I'm making this assumption. And again, I'm only basing it off of who I would want for next season, not, 5 to 10 years down the line. But all that aside, let's start with QB number 32. And I got it as Andy Dalton. And also, again, to get off on a different tangent, this is as deep as the QB position's ever been in the NFL. I talked about this in my power rankings. This is as competitive as I've ever seen the NFL. I'm only 23 years old, so it's a smaller sample size than I'm sure most of you might have. But this is as deep as the QB position gets, and that's part of why the NFL is so competitive from a team-to-team basis. And Andy Dalton, maybe 5 years ago or so, he was knocking on the door and putting together a really strong argument to be a top 12 quarterback, and now he's at 32. Some of it's regression, but some of it is how good the position has gotten. But he's the odd man out. Of these other starting quarterbacks, he was the one I would least want, so that's why he comes in at 32. And in the position ahead of him, Jared Goff, a guy who was playing in a Super Bowl 3 years ago, right? 2018 against the Patriots. He comes in at 31. I worry about the decision making, the ability to make more than just one read. Not necessarily when he makes throws or who he throws to, but it's the ability to, when that first read's not there, what does it look like? And, now you're away from Sean McVay and you're going to Dan Campbell, Anthony Lynn, different offensive mind. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out for him moving forward. But I don't think the Lions team is a long-term option, and him at number 31, I would agree with that assessment. And then we get to Jalen Hurts at 30. And this is tough because, again, he's coming in above a guy who was in a Super Bowl a handful of years ago and a guy who, half a decade ago was borderline top 12-ish quarterback in the league. But Hurts, I like the progression he's made from college to the NFL level, and he still needs to get better as a passer. He needs to become a more consistent passer. He needs to be able to win over the middle of the field, but he is a very good athlete, so he provides you with a floor that Goff and Dalton don't give you. So maybe that's why, in a vacuum setting, I would prefer to have Hurts over the other two. But nonetheless, he has got to get better as a QB if he wants to be the franchise guy in Philadelphia, which I do think he has the makings of. He won't ever be somebody who I think becomes like a Patrick Mahomes, but he could become a Derek Carr level quarterback in my eyes. If everything works in the right way, he could be that, 16 to 14 type of quarterback, and with a great defense on the other side of the ball and great pass catchers around him and a great head coach. It's enough to carry you into Super Bowl contention status. Obviously, a lot of ifs in that statement. I don't like leaning on asterisks, but I still think Hurts has a bright future. But as of right now, he's my quarterback number 30. And then Sam Darnold at 29, and he's tough, right? Like, I've used the analogy to describe Sam Darnold as buying a used car. Sometimes you can fix it up, and it's like brand new. You got a great bargain on a next-to-new car. And sometimes you spend too many hours and too much money on parts, and it just never gets off the ground, and it's not worth it. And that's kind of where I'm at with Sam Darnold. I'm probably more the latter than the former. I do think Matt Rule and Joe Brady, if anybody's going to resurrect the career, it's those two offensive minds, and he's got the best pass-catching core around him. He's got Christian McCaffrey lining up in the backfield next to him, who's also a fantastic wide receiving option. So the pieces are together for Darnold to make a step forward and become probably the best year in his career. And it doesn't have to be much to get to that point, which is ultimately what is kind of the problem with Darnold thus far in his early career. But as of right now, from what I've seen, I think I can't put him much higher than 29. Maybe a couple spots ahead, depending on how you see the league, but he's still in the low 20s when it comes to QB rankings, and I have him at number 29. On to Cam Newton at 28. It's a tricky one, right? Because there's been a lot of hype about, now full offseason. He's got better weapons this year. Second year in the system. And that's part of what I think helped Aaron Rodgers last year in Green Bay. Some of it's just Aaron Rodgers got back on track, and him and Matt LaFleur, worked out some of their differences that we might have seen in year one. And he went on a revenge tour of sorts. And if he's back in Green Bay, I'd be scared if I'm an NFL team for what he might do this year, right? But anyways, Cam Newton, second year in the system, better weapons, full off season to get antiquated with the team. All that points in a positive direction. And heck, even through the first 3 weeks of last year, which is too small of a sample size to base off the MVP race, but the first 3 weeks, Cam Newton was in the conversation very early on. So there is a pathway for Cam Newton at the end of the 2021 season where he is much higher than position number 28. But as it stands right now, from where I saw him towards the end of his playing time last season, where the Pats felt they need to make the move to Jarrett Stidham, not a good sign, so I have him here at 28. And then Teddy Bridgewater at 27. This is the one differential I have from our lads. I could have easily put the rookies in, but again, I'm going to talk about them at the very end of the video, so stick around. But I just think Teddy Bridgewater wins the job. I think if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, Vic Fangio is going to find himself in a position where Drew Lock might have the higher upside, but he's 12-20 through 2 years, and he knows his name is, in the conversation for potential firing mid-season, as early as midway through this season, which is crazy because he's done a great job with the defense, but got to win games. That's what pays the bills. So I could see him in a situation where it's like, hey, Drew might be able to take a leap in year 3, but if we don't see it in the training camp and in the preseason, I got to go with the safe option in Teddy Bridgewater, somebody who can be a game manager and limit turnovers, and then we'll pound the rock with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, and we'll have a great defense, and we'll play a different brand of football than the rest of the division, and hopefully it works in our favor. So that's why I decided to go Teddy Bridgewater. And again, we're talking about a league where Teddy B's 27. That's kind of a scary sight to see. But he doesn't do anything exceptional. He's a smart guy. He doesn't have the athletic ability he once did back when he was drafted out of Louisville. But, he's an okay guy moving outside the pocket, has a little bit of legs still underneath him. And he's just going to limit turnovers. And he's playing for a team that has a fantastic defense, has a couple of good running backs, and awesome pass catchers. So if he's able to make throws, put it on the money for guys like Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, who's coming back, Noah Fant, KJ Hamler, who can hopefully limit the drops, same with Jeudy, he's going to be okay, and he's going to be fine. But the problem is the NFL is so deep at the QB position, fine, really, instead of being at like 16, it's really about 27 where I have Teddy B. Anyways, moving on to Daniel Jones at number 26. And he, as well as Tua, who you'll see on your screen here at 20, two guys that could easily make strong leaps up the board because the offenses around them have gotten so much improved, specifically at the pass-catching position, where their numbers are going to be inflated and they're going to buoy them up if they look good this year. And Jones also has Saquon Barkley coming back. The big question is going to be the offensive line. Does he have the ability to, one, get more comfortable in the pocket? That's something he needs to get better at, and he needs to limit the fumbles. Kind of a similar note there, but the offensive line might not be doing him any favors, specifically on the interior. I think they'll be better at the tackle spots. I think they might move on from Nate Solder and then have Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Pert at right tackle. And then, Nate Solder becomes an available left tackle. It's kind of interesting to think about where he might go, but that's not what we're talking about today. So Jones right now at 26, based off of what I've seen, turnover prone, though he has a couple of big games. Going back to his rookie year, really had a multi-touchdown game. I remember in his first appearance against Tampa Bay, kind of took the league by storm for a week. But there have been flashes. Now I need to see it more consistently. Need to see him to cut back on the fumbles. Needs to cut down on those, PFF term here, but turnover-worthy plays. So there's a pathway for him to definitely move up the board, though. Great offensive, weapons around him. He just needs to get more comfortable in the pocket, make better decisions, limit the fumbles, and then he'll easily move up from 26. And just ahead of him is Zach Wilson, which is tough because where do you put a rookie on here, right? Like, it's obviously a steep learning curve for a rookie adjusting to the speed of the game, getting antiquated with a new offensive system and a new core group of pass catchers and offensive linemen surrounding him, right? But then also it's like you could know the play and you could make the right throw, but you also have to make it at the right time. And that kind of goes to the speed of the game. So it's a steep curve, no doubt about it. So then the question becomes, what rookie do I want to deal with the headaches, with all that surrounding him versus a veteran who may not be great, but you don't have all those problems and rookie errors coming with it. And here's about the line. Maybe you put Jones just ahead of Wilson. It's up for debate. The New York guys you could flip for sure, but I like the upside with Wilson. I saw something the other day on Twitter describing Spencer Rattler as the Gen Z quarterback, which as a Gen Z I totally appreciated. The ability to, when the play breaks down, just do something crazy and make something backyard football-like happen, and it results in a big play. Escaping the pocket, mobility, kind of what we see with Deshaun Watson and Josh Allen, and, just not a Gen Z, but Russell Wilson was kind of the first of this wave. Patrick Mahomes now is another good example of it, of course. And Zach Wilson has a lot of those traits as well. Big-armed, can make the throw down the field, has a beautiful deep pass, perfect spiral. He has all those things that are visually appealing to look at play football, and then when the play breaks down, he's a wizard. He is fantastic to watch, make something out of nothing. So because of that, I felt like I could give him the nod, just over Daniel Jones, despite Jones not having the rookie headaches. He still is, turnover prone to a degree, but I gave Wilson just the nod ahead of Jones at 25. And then on to 24. This is another tricky one because Carson Wentz was once upon a time an MVP candidate, and the guy I have just ahead of him, Jameis Winston, has been a turnover-prone machine. So this comes down to what Carson Wentz do you imagine in your mind? And for me, I know I'm talking about ideal situation, and Indianapolis is about as close as it can get for him to bounce back from where he ended last season in Philadelphia. But what I saw last year, bad decision-making, missing throws, doesn't look comfortable in the pocket. I think that'll all get better. He'll take a step forward this year, back with Frank Reich. Also has a better offensive line in front of him, or at least an offensive line that you figure will stay healthy. Philadelphia really struggled in that area last year. Doesn't have great pass catchers around him, though, in the wide receiver core. I like Michael Pittman, but aging T.Y. Hilton, injury-prone Paris Campbell, it's going to be tricky. And overall, when I look at Carson Wentz, it's gotten to the point where he looks scared a lot of the times, and that makes it really difficult. So that's why I ultimately give the nudge to Jameis Winston, because he throws a ton of picks, but he never doesn't look confident. And confidence sells. So you could probably flip these two around based off your preference. Wentz once was an MVP candidate, but Jameis Winston once was a number one overall pick. And, every year it feels like someone who's been talking about Winston, like, this is the year he'll cut down on turnovers. It'll be Bruce Arians that gets through him. Now it's going to be Sean Payton that gets through his head. I don't know if it'll happen, but I do know Winston is a lot of fun to watch, so maybe that bias is why I give him the spot up above Wentz, but I'm also buying low on Wentz right now, and I've had some Colts fans really irritated with where I take on them. That's why I want to do this team preview series. Win range for the Colts is probably 6-11, and I have them at 6 wins in my preseason projection, so I am admittedly very low on Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts, and I have Jameis Winston just ahead of him. Those two come in at 24 and 23 respectively. Then for Ryan Fitzpatrick at 22, and I guess you could talk about Big Ben too at 21. The two aging guys who at this point have become game managers. Two guys don't lose the game for us, right? We'll talk about Fitzpatrick first. Has a great defense on the other side of the ball. Has an awesome running back group. J.D. McKissick essentially is an extension of the wide receiver room, and Antonio Gibson played wide receiver in college, so in a lot of ways he is too. Love the emergence of Logan Thomas at that tight end spot, and you bring in Curtis Samuel, who can be another gadget. Ron Rivera didn't use him as a running back, but hopefully he saw Matt Rule give him 80 snaps last year in the backfield, and he'll take that number and then raise the hand some and use him in the backfield a ton because he's a mismatched nightmare for linebackers to try to match up with, and he's gotten better as a wide receiver. Giving some help to Terry McLaurin, rightfully so. De'Ami Brown, I'm really excited about what he could bring to that offense as a downfield threat opposite in addition to Terry McLaurin. So Fitzpatrick, he comes in this spot because you know what you're getting. He knows how to run an offense. He's been around the league for so long. But he could be higher if he wasn't such a roller coaster, right? Like, you're going to have games where he throws 5 touchdowns, number 1 QB in fantasy, and you're like, why is Fitzpatrick the number 1 guy this week? That doesn't make sense. Retire already. And then the next week, he'll bottom out for no touchdowns at 5 picks. This year, I need to see him be more stable, right? You love to see the big games, but you need to minimize those bad games. And those bad games, despite how good Washington is on the defensive side, could cost a team that is in a tight race with Dallas at the top of the NFC East. And, we haven't seen Dak Prescott's name on this list yet. And that's because he's a very good quarterback, top 10 in my eyes. And we'll get to that later on. So the room for error might be more slim now than it ever has been for Fitzpatrick, which is crazy to say given he's been thrown out in a ton of different situations. But this is a team that should win the division on paper with how good the defense is, the weapons, the running back, even the offensive line, great head coach as well. So Fitzpatrick, I just need to see him play more stable, minimize the harm while keeping the positive in those big games and ridiculous throws that he makes, which is obviously easier said than done. But if he does that, don't be surprised if he moves up from 22 at the end of the season. And for Ben Roethlisberger, he's not the guy he once was, right? I still think he has an arm. Like, a lot of people want to just discredit Big Ben as this completely washed up QB. He's not to Drew Brees level of, arm weakness. I saw it at the end of last year in that second half against the Colts game. I reference this game all the time on this channel. But go back and watch the second half. He was calling plays, and he was making throws down the field. He had a 40-plus yard dot to Deontay Johnson. It was a huge touchdown to try to bring Pittsburgh back and ultimately make the comeback in that game. So it may not be the Big Ben of old, but it's not to Drew Brees status where it really caps what you can do on the offensive side. But the best thing Ben can do is embrace the Matt Canada new offense. Be willing to add play-action plays to the playbook. Pittsburgh was by far last year in play-action plays. You have to get comfortable with your back to the defense for a beat or two, and then it'll set up positive plays. Play-action has proven to be one of the more efficient offensive play types in the NFL. And Ben Roethlisberger may not be the guy he once was, throwing for 5,000-plus yards, but if he can give you 35 touchdowns, 10 picks, minimize the harm, win the game where he needs to, make the throws late, and put the ball in the hands of Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, Pat Freiermuth, Eric Ebron, the list goes on and on and on, Najee Harris for that matter. If he can put those players in a position to succeed, that's all they need him to do. And then the defense has to continue to be what it has been, though it has lost a lot of pieces. So it's going to be tricky, but it doesn't have to be Big Ben from 5 years ago. It just needs to be a Big Ben who's willing to throw the ball down the field like he did in that second half of the Colts game last year. It can't just be this quick throw offense we saw really get stagnant at the end of last season. Regardless, though, I put Fitzpatrick and Big Ben together. Ultimately ended up being right next to each other in this ranking because they're the veterans who just need to manage the game, minimize the damage, put the team in a position to maximize the talent around them, and try to turn that into a lot of W's because they're two teams that could certainly be in the playoffs at the end of the regular season. On to QB number 20. This is a tough one, right? Like, Tua didn't look better than Fitzpatrick last year. So why do I have him ahead? Part of it's projection. You have a better pass-catching core around him. Yeah, I think the offensive line will improve naturally just because a lot of rookies were playing last year, and they'll get a little bit better in year two. Though I will say last year was a little concerning. He just kind of looked smaller. The arm looked a little weaker. He just didn't look the same as he did at Alabama, in a big area where he really struggled considering where he was so dominant in college was throwing over the middle of the field 10 to 19 yards. Like, he used to just pick defenses apart when he was playing at Alabama, and then he was honestly pretty bad throwing to that part of the field last year, statistically speaking. I'm not one to talk. Obviously, I'm not making that throw either. But regardless, I need to see him get better in that area. But outside of Devontae Parker, who's still more of a contested catch guy, he doesn't create a whole lot of separation for himself. They didn't really have anybody who naturally gets open, but that changes with Will Fuller, who's a big play threat, but also improving as a wide receiver, and then Jalen Waddle, who has downfield speed, but also a fantastic yak option. So I think putting weapons around him will move Tua up this list, but if he disappoints this year, he's probably the QB with the most variance, right? If he's disappointing, like I was saying, he's going down to 27, 26, 25-ish range. But if he looks really good, he could make an argument into the top 16 easily. So he's a tough guy to put on this list. I'm buying into what I saw in college with the addition of the weapons around him, so I put him here at number 20. And then you have Jimmy Garoppolo at 19. Look, this is a guy that was one throw away from winning a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. He missed the throw, which of course why he's not top 10, right? Because he's not a perfect quarterback. He's not elite, but he does a lot of things right. And he is on his way out in San Francisco, but in a lot of ways, the right guy for that team. He runs play action really well, and he embraces all the movement and how Shanahan draws people open, and he can just make those throws in the intermediate to short areas of the field. Asking him to stretch the field can be difficult. Again, of course, citing the overthrow to Emmanuel Sanders in that Super Bowl against Kansas City, but he's still a solid option, and that's why I have him here at 19. And again, it's a deep QB class. 10 years ago, Jimmy G, you just drop him into the NFL at that time, he's a lot higher than 19 just because he's a good, competent starting quarterback. But now we have so many filling up the ranks of the NFL where good isn't good enough. And that's why you see San Francisco saying, hey, we'll trade the farm to move from 12 to 3 to try to get a guy who could eventually be, with his potential, a top 5 QB in the league, because good isn't good enough anymore. But I will say, Jimmy G, a throw away from winning a Super Bowl. I think he is good enough to be a Super Bowl caliber QB, but you need to have an elite defense. You need to have a fantastic running game. You need to have pass catchers. You basically need to be the San Francisco 49ers of 2 years ago and Jimmy G to make a throw to stave off his Kansas City comeback. But regardless, I still like Jimmy Garoppolo, and this is probably his last year in San Francisco. But even after that, I think he'll continue to be a league average to above average starter in the NFL for a couple more seasons minimum. On to Joe Burrow at 18. We'll even talk about Trevor Lawrence here at 17 to round out the first portion of names here on the screen. It was tricky to put these two, and I had to put them next to each other because, where do you put the number 1 pick last year versus the number 1 pick this year? I gave Lawrence the edge because we've been talking about him being the number 1 pick and, the best QB prospects since Manning and Luck and all that for 3 years now. It's like all anybody wanted to talk about when we talked about Clemson. And I like Joe Burrow. I like him a lot. But also the injury concerns, not only physically, but mentally. How does that affect him? I think he's going to be fine. He has an awesome group of wide receivers around him, which definitely helps. But so does Trevor Lawrence, right? Like DJ Chark, Marvin Jones Jr., Laviska Shenault. You got to love those weapons around him. So I think both these guys are going to end up being franchise guys. And I think in a year's time, they'll both be a lot higher than position number 17 and 18, respectively. I think they'll both make their ways up. But this is going to be Burrow's first full season. Of course, we hope he stays healthy. And then Trevor Lawrence is a rookie. So, it's a steep curve. Of course, we talked about that with Wilson earlier. So, right now, this is probably as low as we'll see them on a QB rankings list. But for right now, 17 and 18. In the future, of course, they'll make their ways up. But I like the future for both those guys. On to the next list of players you'll see on the screen. We'll start with Baker Mayfield at 16. And this might be a little bit of a controversial one. People who love Baker Mayfield love him to death. So, it's tough. He will move up on this list if I see a second consecutive good season out of him. Right, he looks really good down the stretch his rookie year, sets the rookie passing touchdown record, which then was snapped by Justin Herbert, but still finishes his rookie year really strong. Year 2, big bump. A lot of that's Freddie Kitchens, and I'm not putting it all on Baker, but he's the quarterback, so he has to get some of the credit. As much as we want to give him, praise for being a good quarterback last year and taking this team to the playoffs, and he deserves some of that credit, he also deserves some of the blame for 2 years ago where that team was just a complete dumpster fire and everyone was about a year early on them being a playoff caliber team. But then he bounced back and he was really good last year. So I want to see it for a second consecutive season, and then I'll have full confidence putting him ahead of a guy like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, and into the echelon, maybe even above Derek Carr, right around that Ryan Tannehill range. But while we're talking about this, you see it on the screen. Yeah, Mayfield at 16, Cousins at 15, and then Carr at 14, Tannehill at 13. And all these guys, in a lot of ways, feel very similar to me. They are products of the offense in which they play. Maybe less with Carr. It feels like he is the ignition to the offense. But you look at Tannehill, you look at Mayfield, you look at Cousins. They are guys who want a lot of play action, a lot of success off of that. And it comes from having dominant run games, right? Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Nick Chubb. Those may be the 3 best running backs in football right now. If they're not the 3 best, they're 3 of the top 6, whatever, to play it safe. So those guys all benefit from having an offense that is catered towards run first, which might be a little backwards for modern football, but nonetheless it works for those teams, and it sets up play action where Justin Jefferson just gets one-on-one down the field, and he's going to take advantage of a cornerback, and Kirk Cousins can put the ball in the money. And for Baker Mayfield, it's hopefully OBJ coming back healthy, but if not him, it's Austin Hooper wide open on a post from running that inline spot. And for someone like Ryan Tannehill, it's finding AJ Brown, a top 5 wide receiver potentially in the NFL, just bullying a cornerback and then refusing to go down after 4 Ravens try to take him down. But these all these guys really benefit from the scheme that they're in. And realistically, Derek Carr too. When this team can run the football, when the Raiders have a good offensive line, they are a very good running football team, and then it helps Derek Carr that much more. Though modern numbers would suggest passing game opens up the run as opposed to, the conventional wisdom from when I was younger that you run first to set up the pass. Really, stats would say it's the other way around. And Carr, more than the other guys, I think is the key to the ignition. I think the Titans would be okay I don't think they'd be good. They wouldn't be a playoff team without Tannehill, but you pound the rock enough with Derrick Henry and have a league average quarterback, you'll find ways to win games, right? You take Derek Carr away from Las Vegas, this is a team that's probably in the discussion to pick top 3 next year, at least in my opinion. So tell me what you think about that. But this cluster of QBs all feel very similar to me, and that's why I have them ranked, 16 through 13. And then we get to somebody different, Kyler Murray at 12. And it was tough to put him over some of those guys like Carr and like Tannehill, but his legs give you such a high floor. Like, no matter what, he's gonna bring you production, and he's gonna be fantastic in the red zone. He is the most efficient runner on that team inside the red zone. Even back when they had Kenyon Drake, he was the one who found the end zone the most with his legs, which speaks to his evasiveness and also his pocket presence. But he is getting better as a passer, and they have made strides to improve him in that area. That air raid offense also helps, buoy offensive line numbers, so Murray has been able to avoid a ton of pressure. He does need to improve throwing the ball over the middle of the field. That's an area where this team needs to get better in general. And AJ Green didn't do a whole lot of positive things last year in Cincy, especially as a downfield threat. But over the middle of the field, I think he can still be an okay option. I do think Larry Fitzgerald retires, and then the addition of Rondale Moore, if he's running those screen plays that they basically had Larry Fitzgerald running as an extension of the run game, but then also just throw a quick little pass over the middle of the field, a little 5-yard hitch over in between the numbers, or little 5-yard in to Rondale Moore, and just let him do everything else after that. I think that'll improve and open up the offense. Plus, Cliff Kingsbury needs to move DeAndre Hopkins around. A lot of people and I have mentioned it a ton in these videos. You can't just lie and hop out on the left side and just stick him out there. You got to modernize the offense. You got to get creative. You got to put them in different situations to keep a defense on their toes. Look, Keenan Allen has just bullied cornerbacks because defenses refuse to adjust how they play defense and how they align cornerbacks. So Keenan Allen would move to the slot and be going against number 3 guys. And if teams are going to give you that, do that with DeAndre Hopkins and watch the results pour in. But I have Kyler Murray just edging out those other guys because he gives you more mobility, even than someone like Ryan Tannehill, who is a good athlete. Kyler Murray is just unmatched when it comes to that position. Like him and Lamar Jackson, just so good with their legs. It's not something you would have seen 10 years ago, right? So fantastic. And because of that, it gives you such a high floor. So I give Murray the edge over the other 4 quarterbacks I talked about at length with that group, Tannehill running through Mayfield. And then we get to number 11, Matt Ryan. And he's another tough one to place on this list because he's still good, right? Like, he's still a good quarterback. But, age is eventually going to play into effect. Right now, he's 36 years old. Breeze really started to peter off at age 39, 40. Same point that it hit Peyton Manning. And Tom Brady's, you don't compare yourself to Tom Brady because he's different. And then Big Ben's in his upper 30s now, I think 39. So we're starting to see regression really hit him as well. So time is ticking for Matt Ryan, but I think he's still good. And I feel comfortable with him here at 11. He hasn't really lost any arm strength, was a good sign. Losing Julio hurts, but having Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurts is an okay tight end. Arthur Smith, I think, is going to help. Arthur Smith's a big part of Ryan Tannehill's success, and I think he'll help maybe add some production towards the end of the career for Matt Ryan. But aside from all the outside factors, I still see it for Matt Ryan. Like, he needs to get better in the pocket. He still always has been this awkward guy when pressure comes in. I don't know how to describe it when you watch him, but when he feels pressure, it's just not comfortable to look at. But when he's got a clean pocket and he has time to make reads, he's as accurate, and his arm strength hasn't tapered off, so he's got to be top 11 in my opinion. And now we get into the top 10, Matt Stafford. I am probably higher on Stafford than most. I wouldn't say all, because I know there's some people, especially I have some people I work with who are from the Michigan area, and there's some people there who will still swear by Matt Stafford as a top 5, the top 7 QB in the league. And, I'm not quite there, but I have long been somebody who said Matt Stafford's a top 10 to 12 quarterback, and I just like he still has a strong arm, and I think that's going to really open up the McVay offense, and also his ability to bounce off of just the first read, I think is a big progression for this team from Jared Goff to Matt Stafford. He still knows how to put the ball on the money. He battles through injuries. He's a tough guy. He knows how to, considering he's coming from a team that didn't win a lot, he has that grit that he feels like he's due to win a whole lot of games here soon enough. Like, I saw him will the Lions to games they had no business winning, or will them into situations where they were in it late that they didn't deserve to be in. So if that translates to a much better roster, this will bode well for any Rams fans listening and watching, that if he can do it with the Lions, he's going to do a whole lot better with that Rams team. And I'm still a big Stafford fan, so we'll see how he shakes out with McVay this upcoming season. And then we get to Justin Herbert. So I had the two New York guys together at 25, 26. Now I have the two LA guys here at 9 and 10. And maybe I'm a little early on Herbert. I mentioned this to my friends. They think it's a little high, but I don't know. I see it. A lot of people have given him the moniker Baby Goat. That's really Patrick Mahomes, honestly, if we're being serious. But, dude, when it comes to mobility, making plays off script, he was fantastic against pressure, which is not necessarily a stat that is normally stable, right? Like, it normally varies year by year. It's just kind of like a random QB gets it. But this team improved the offensive line, so his success against pressure ideally is going to go down because he's going to see less pressure. So he has the arm strength. He's a super accurate quarterback. He has mobility. Again, I am interested to see how Joe Lombardi uses him. Talked about maybe adding more read option plays into that. So if that's the case, that's kind of an interesting quirk to add to the offense. I don't like the idea of him taking potentially more hits, but it's one more element to the offense that opposing defenses have to respect because Herbert is a good athlete. So he's got everything you want in a QB. His skill set is that of a top 5 QB. And I think in year 2, he'll have an opportunity to solidify himself into that conversation. But again, he's top 5 already 5 years ago. Like, I'm dead serious. Like, if you dropped him into the NFL, maybe not 5 years ago, let's say 8 so I can play it safe. You know, he's right there behind the likes of, you know, Brady and Manning and Aaron Rodgers. You know, he's in that conversation just given his skill set and the talent that he shows. But this is a deep NFL, so he comes in at number 9. And then we get to Dak Prescott here at number 8. I'm a big Dak Prescott believer. I liked him a lot coming out of college. Didn't understand totally why he fell to the 4th round. I guess because he's, you know, maybe a tad small, doesn't have the strongest arm. But again, good athlete. He brings a high floor, and that's something that has to be appreciated to an extent. And at the NFL, all he has done is defy everyone's expectations. Him and Kirk Cousins in a lot of ways, like whatever the people have set the bar for has been too low, and then he just surpasses it. And he gets some credit. He gets some people to, you know, turn a cheek and say, okay, yep, they're a good player. And then next year, the bar just gets raised higher and higher by the critics, and then they continue to elevate their game. You know, that's, you know, gotten to a point to where it's not so much the case with Kirk Cousins. Everybody just kind of sees him as a good quarterback, but maybe not great. But Dak Prescott, if you don't think he's a great quarterback, then I don't really know what to tell you. Watch the tape. I mean, he's very mobile. He has a good enough arm. He is super accurate. His pocket presence is fantastic. When it comes to feeling pressure, Dak Prescott might be among the best in the NFL. I mean, it's fantastic. And ultimately, that comfort around the pocket and avoiding pressure, I think, is why he has turned so many heads and ultimately gained the approval of a lot of different people. Even non-Cowboys fans have now gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, Dak Prescott's really good. He needs to get paid, right? Like almost everybody around the NFL is like, all right, pay the man. He deserves it. And I think a large part of that is because of how quickly he became antiquated with the game, but also how comfortable he looks in the pocket and his ability to field pressure, make throws against pressure as well. I mean, I'm a big believer in Dak Prescott, if that's not abundantly clear now. Moving on to number 7, Lamar Jackson, right? MVP a couple years ago. Still need to see some more growth as a passer, but I think some of that's the weapons, right? Like Willie Snead is not a guy who gets open on his own. And, you know, Mark Ingram had some drop issues last year. Actually, Lamar Jackson had the 3rd most catchable passes go incomplete. This is per PFF. That's unbelievable. But it's because he was working with a group of pass catchers who, outside of Mark Ingram, but even, or Mark Andrews, outside of Mark Andrews, how many of them are great crisp route runners? And then how many of those guys aren't great route runners and then also aren't known for their hands like Willie Snead? And then Mark Andrews, again, had the drop issues last year. So you put a lot of weapons around him this offseason. Sammy Watkins, if he can stay healthy, is a upgrade. Rashad Bateman, even as a rookie, is an upgrade. Tylan Wallace, I think, makes his way onto the field. That's an upgrade. And then you're taking Marquise Brown from being the number 1, and you're playing him in a field-stretching slot position. I'm all about it. I think that's the role he should have been in this whole time. Even if he is your best wide receiver, that's where he'll thrive the best. And it's all about putting players in a position to succeed, not about where they rank on a depth chart. But, I mean, I'm not an NFL head coach. What do I know? But anyways, I think all this helps out both alleviate pressure for Lamar Jackson, but also Mark Andrews. I think he's going to bounce back this year because he's not trying to be the only pass catcher this team has at its disposal. So right now he's at 7, but if the passing numbers improve, it's hard to say he's not top 5 given how good he is with his legs. He just needs to prove it and then win a playoff game this year, and it's probably a done deal. He probably moves into the top 5. On to QB number 6. It's Russell Wilson. And, another tough one because the first 7 weeks last year, he's the MVP frontrunner, right? Of course, there's the narrative, right? Like, Russ has never gotten an MVP vote. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty crazy. That sounds wild. But then when you just throw it out there so much, it just loses its weight, right? And then after the first 7 weeks, Russell Wilson was kind of his own worst enemy, and the offense just really degraded and went downhill fast. So I'm looking for a full 17 games of production from Russell Wilson, but even when he's bad, like even when he's playing down like he was at the end of last year, he's Russell Wilson. Great athlete. You know he extends plays, and he throws maybe the prettiest deep pass in the NFL. Him and Aaron Rodgers probably would be my bets. And then, of course, like Mahomes is crazy good, but like the high arc that Wilson puts it on makes it easy for a guy like DK Metcalf to win at the catch point, and he just puts it in a basket every time for Tyler Lockett. So despite me wanting to see more from Russell Wilson, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's not a top 6 quarterback. He's fantastic. We all recognize him as elite. There's a reason why the Bears are making phone calls and talking about giving up Roquan Smith, Akeem Hicks, and 3 first-round picks for him because he's great. He's a fantastic QB. And in a lot of other decades, he's probably top 3. But again, it's a deep QB class in the NFL. So Wilson comes in at number 6. And then I have Josh Allen at 5. And this is probably where I catch a little bit of heat. I'm a Josh Allen stan. Obviously, I didn't have the YouTube channel back in this draft class, but I had Josh Allen on my number 1 position to the Cleveland Browns in that mock draft. And then, day of the draft, of course, the Browns make it known that they're going to take Baker Mayfield. But maybe it's a little early to anoint Allen as somebody who's above Russell Wilson and above Lamar Jackson, right? Like, Allen hasn't even won an MVP. At least you can say 2 years ago Lamar did. So I understand that, and that's your point of contention with this video. I totally get it. This comes from me being a big Josh Allen believer, and year by year he's gotten better. He's taken steps in the right direction to take away turnover-worthy plays, and he's been able to add downfield accuracy. And those were the 2 knocks on him coming out of Wyoming. He extends plays. He's great outside the pocket. He needs to improve throwing to his left, which is something I actually was reading about today per PFF, again, to mention them. Kind of weird, the differential there, throwing to the left versus everywhere else, but considering the leap he made from 1 to 2 to then 2 to 3 to finish in 2nd place in the MVP voting, it doesn't even have to be that big of a leap into year 4. He just needs to find touches. And you'll see quarterbacks all the time. They'll add little improvements. It's the theory of 1%. If I can get 1% better across the board, I'm making a good leap. And if Josh Allen can just do that 1% across the board, it's going to be tough for him to be knocked out of the top 5, at least in my eyes, because he has all the tools, and he has good pass catchers, so the stats are going to look good. So I'm a big Josh Allen believer, so maybe I have him a little high, but let me know down in the comment section what you think. And then we get to Deshaun Watson here, number 4, and this is going to be a quick one because I don't know about what his playing status is going to be, and our lad still has him as the starter. If it's Tyrod Taylor, go ahead and pencil him in at 32. I'd probably take, maybe 31. Maybe I'd take Taylor over Andy Dalton. I don't know. Coin flip between the two. They're both, they are what they are. They're NFL players, right? Like, they can start games for you, but that's not your long-term option. So if it's Tyrod Taylor, put him at 31, 32. But when Deshaun Watson's playing, he's a top 4 quarterback in this league. And you can make an argument up until Aaron Rodgers' revenge tour last year, he had a pathway to be number 2 right behind Mahomes. Obviously, Brady adds him to the Super Bowl, and he looks great at the end of the season, and Rodgers wins an MVP, so I have Watson here at 4. But when it comes to the talent, there's no disputing. He's a top 5 player in the league, but I just, it's tough to try to project how many games he plays this year, what the off-the-field issues, turn into. So I'll leave it at that. On to QB number 3, Tom Brady. I mean, he's still doing it. And we're talking about for 1 year. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of names I take over Tom Brady, right? Like, he took a team that went 7-9, that had a lot of talent around him. I get that, but still 7-9. It took him to the Super Bowl in year 1. Shoot, he took a team that was, 7-5 at one point, and then just win the last 4 games at the end of the year, stomp through the playoffs on the road, winning in Lambeau. Need I remind you, winning in New Orleans? I mean, phew. That's pretty crazy that he did all that in year 1. Now he's back for more. He's still able to make those throws. And they even varied up the offense so he could throw the ball a little bit more down the field. He's not quite, what he once was, throwing bombs to Randy Moss, but the arm strength is good enough. And they have so much talent, and he knows exactly how to read defenses. It's just like Peyton Manning. Even when his arm started to falter, he could win the game at the line of scrimmage. And Brady, obviously, is still somebody who can do that, knows how to read a defense, finds the open man every time, picks in parts of defense. And he's a guy that he'll hit you with, 5 consecutive 15-yard passes and get down the field real quick. Or if you're gonna nickel and dime him, he'll take it 5 yards at a time. I'm a Steelers fan. Used to watch him do it to us all the time when he was with the Pats. So glad to see him in the NFC, by the way. But Tom Brady's still doing it at a high level. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. And then we get to Aaron Rodgers at number 2. he's coming off an MVP season. He's awesome. He is starting to get up there in age, but did you see his arm last year? It hasn't gone anywhere. His downfield accuracy, like I said, him and Russell Wilson to me. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes, I guess you have to throw in the mix. But Mahomes could be the best of everything, honestly, when it comes to, if you were to make a top 5 of everything you want in a QB, Mahomes is probably there, which I guess while we're talking about Patrick Mahomes, shocker here, is number 1. But Mahomes and Rodgers, and then, you could throw Brady into the mix. It's tough to come close to what they're doing right now. Like Brady, in the regards of how he's extended his career and continue to have success despite his age, unbelievable. And Aaron Rodgers bouncing back last year and proving he still has it, unbelievable, because he just broke the trend. The trend was pointing downward, and then he just shot upwards at a degree of 1,000%. And then Patrick Mahomes to be an MVP winner, Super Bowl MVP winner, take his team to the playoffs every year as a starter, and he's not even 25. We're turning 25 this upcoming season. Come on. That's stuff you make up in a video game. Like, that's unbelievable. But that's going to do it for my top 32 QB rankings. I will say, I promise you, I talked about the QBs, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields that I didn't have on this ranking. So if you expand this out to top 35 quarterbacks, I would have them inserted at in between Teddy Bridgewater and Daniel Jones. Bridgewater was 27, Jones was 26. So I'd have, ultimately, it would become Teddy Bridgewater at 27, 26 would be Mac Jones, 25 would be Trey Lance, and 24 would be Justin Fields, and then you'd get to Daniel Jones. But even that's kind of tricky. I might take Fields over Jones right now. I'd probably take Lance over Jones. So right around that mid-20s mark, because again, it's just tough to project how they take to the NFL immediately. So rookie quarterbacks don't typically rank high in people's QB power rankings, but tell me, since I didn't have them on this list, tell me where you'd put them. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I respond to every comment in the comment section, so I'd love to have that conversation with you where you think they end up at the end of the season, especially if a guy like Fields starts every game, right? If they give him the nod over Dalton, that's interesting. Mac Jones, same situation in New England, so I'd love to have your thoughts. But comment away who I had too high, who did I have too low, why am I crazy? I'd love to have the talk with you down in the comment section. Like I said, I respond to every comment on my videos, but hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, like what you saw, and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. But that's all I got for you. Hope you all enjoyed and have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.